April 1945. Nazi Germany is collapsing. The Red Army is crushing through from the east. American and British forces are advancing from the west. Hitler's 1,000-year Reich has weeks, perhaps days, to live. And in the chaos of that collapse, trains are moving in the darkness. Not military supply trains, not troop transports, not the horrific trains carrying prisoners to death camps. These are different trains, special trains, trains loaded with gold bars, stolen art, diamonds, currency from a dozen conquered nations, and treasures looted from museums, banks, and private collections across Europe. The trains depart from Berlin, from Munich, from dozens of German cities as Allied bombs fall. They head southeast into mountains toward borders. Some have final destinations written in code. Others carry orders to bury their cargo and eliminate witnesses. Many simply vanish, swallowed by the fog of war, their cargo never recovered, their fate unknown. 80 years later, treasure hunters, historians, and governments are still searching for these ghost trains because the wealth they carried wasn't just valuable, it was staggering. Billions in today's dollars, the accumulated plunder of an entire continent, gold that could finance governments, art that belongs in museums, wealth stolen from millions of victims who never saw justice. Tonight, we're going to explore one of the most enduring treasure mysteries of World War II, the Nazi gold trains. We'll examine which trains are documented fact and which are myth. We'll follow the trails of those that were found and the tantalizing clues about those still missing. We'll meet the treasure hunters who've dedicated their lives to the search, and we'll ask the uncomfortable question, if these trains are found, who does the treasure belong to? This isn't just about gold bars and stolen paintings. It's about the final chapter of World War II that's still being written. It's about justice delayed, but perhaps not denied. It's about how a civilization's treasures can vanish in war and whether they can ever truly be recovered. This is the story of the ghost trains, the rolling vaults of Nazi plunder, the final secret of the Third Reich. To understand the ghost trains, we first need to understand the scale and system of Nazi looting during World War II. This wasn't opportunistic theft by individual soldiers, it was industrial-scale robbery, organized at the highest levels, carried out systematically across occupied Europe. The Reichsleiter Rosenberg Task Force. In 1940, Hitler authorized Alfred Rosenberg to create the Einsatzstab Reichsleiter Rosenberg, ERR, a special task force whose sole purpose was to loot art and cultural treasures from occupied territories. The ERR operated with military efficiency. They cataloged Jewish collections in conquered cities before deportations. They stripped museums, libraries, and private homes of anything valuable. They created detailed inventories of stolen items. They shipped everything back to Germany in organized convoys. They stored plunder in designated warehouses and repositories. This was theft as state policy, documented with German efficiency. We have the receipts, the manifests, the photographs. The ERR alone is estimated to have stolen over 20,000 works of art, 2.5 million books, and countless cultural artifacts. The gold reserves. Beyond art, the Nazis systematically looted the gold reserves of conquered nations. Belgium's gold reserves were seized and shipped to Germany. The Netherlands' central bank. Gold was confiscated. Austrian gold became German gold when Austria was annexed. Czech gold reserves fell into Nazi hands. Gold from banks in Poland, France, and other occupied territories was systematically stolen. The Reichsbank, Germany's central bank, became a repository for stolen gold. Not just gold bars, but also dental gold, the horrifying term for gold teeth removed from concentration camp victims. All of it was melted down, recast, and used to finance the German war machine. The Hungarian Gold Train, one ghost train that was actually found, provides a template for understanding the others. In March 1945, as the Soviet army approached Budapest, Hungarian authorities loaded a train with the wealth of the Hungarian Jewish community, Gold, jewelry, paintings, carpets, valuable furniture, and personal possessions confiscated from over 800,000 people. The train, containing 44 boxcars of treasure, fled west toward Austria. It was captured by American forces in May 1945. What happened next is telling. The treasure was supposed to be repatriated to Hungary and returned to survivors. Instead, much of it was quietly auctioned off, stolen by occupation troops, or disappeared into private collections. It took until 2005, 60 years later, for the U.S. government to officially acknowledge what happened and offer compensation. If that's what happened to a train that was captured and documented, imagine what happened to trains that vanished completely. The scale of Nazi looting. Conservative estimates suggest the Nazis stole 600,000 works of art and cultural objects, $590 million in gold, 1945 dollars, equivalent to billions today, currency and securities from occupied central banks, private wealth from millions of individuals, industrial diamonds, platinum, and other strategic materials. All of this had to be stored somewhere, transported somehow, and ultimately hidden or liquidated as Germany collapsed, and much of it moved by train, because in 1945, Europe, trains were the only way to move large quantities of heavy cargo. The final days. In the final months of the war, as Allied forces closed in, Nazi officials faced a problem. They had enormous stockpiles of stolen wealth, concentrated in German cities that were about to be captured. They couldn't let it fall into enemy hands, not just because of its value, but because it was evidence of their crimes. So orders went out: move it, hide it, bury it, destroy it if necessary, and most importantly, eliminate witnesses. This is when the ghost trains were born. In the chaos of Germany's collapse, with infrastructure crumbling, communications failing, and authority breaking down, trains loaded with treasure departed their warehouses and disappeared into the fog of war. Some made it to their destinations: salt mines, tunnels, underground bunkers. Some were captured en route by Allied forces. Some were looted by the very Germans transporting them as discipline collapsed. And some simply vanished. No one knows where they went. No one knows what happened to them. They became ghosts, rumored but never proven, searched for but never found. Let's examine the most famous cases. Before we explore the trains that are still missing, let's look at ones that were actually found. These documented cases prove the reality of Nazi gold trains and give us insight into what the missing trains might contain. The Merkers Mine discovery. On April 4th, 1945, U.S. Third Army soldiers stumbled onto one of the greatest treasure discoveries in history. In the Merkers salt mine in Thuringia, Germany, they found more than 100 tons of gold bars, billions of Reichsmarks in currency, foreign currency from a dozen nations, thousands of bags of coins, priceless works of art, including paintings by Rembrandt and Manet, the entire gold reserves of the German Reichsbank. The treasure was stored 1,100 feet underground in chambers carved into the salt mine. General Eisenhower personally visited the site, and photographs of him inspecting the stacked gold bars became iconic images of Allied victory. But here's the crucial point. This treasure didn't arrive at Merkers by accident. It was transported there deliberately in the final weeks of the war. If officials had time and resources to move this much wealth to one hiding place, what else did they hide that we haven't found? The Altaussee mine. In Austria, hidden in the Altaussee salt mine, Allied forces discovered perhaps the most significant art repository of the war. Over 6,500 paintings were found, including masterpieces by Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Rembrandt, Vermeer, Bruegel. This was the ERR's main storage facility, the crown jewels of their looting operation. The discovery revealed the scale of Nazi art theft, but also showed how methodically they had cataloged and stored their plunder. Most chillingly, Hitler had ordered the mine destroyed as Allied forces approached. He preferred to destroy the art rather than let it be recovered. Local Austrian resistance fighters prevented the demolition, saving the treasures. But this raises a disturbing question. How many other repositories were successfully destroyed on Hitler's orders? The Forêt de Crécy discovery. In northern France, a different kind of train was found. In 1946, in the forest of Crécy, French authorities discovered an abandoned German military train. It had been hastily hidden as Allied forces advanced in 1944. When they opened the sealed boxcars, they found German military archives, communication equipment, personal effects of high-ranking officers, and 4 boxcars filled with gold coins, jewelry, and artwork. The treasure was modest compared to Merkers, but the discovery confirmed that multiple trains carrying valuables had been dispersed across occupied territory. Lake Toplitz. In Austria's Salzkammergut region, Lake Toplitz has been the subject of treasure hunts for decades. During the war, the Nazis used the deep cold lake for testing underwater weapons. In the final days, witnesses reported seeing SS troops dumping wooden crates into the lake. Multiple diving expeditions have recovered boxes of counterfeit British pounds from a failed Nazi operation to destabilize the British economy, documents and communications equipment, weapons. But persistent rumors suggest gold and other valuables were also dumped there. The lake is treacherous, dark, cold, with underwater caves and debris. Several divers have died attempting to explore it. If treasure is there, it remains elusive and deadly. The SS Minden. Not all treasure moved by train. The SS Minden was a German blockade runner that left Japan in December 1944, carrying payment for German technology, several tons of gold, platinum, and industrial diamonds. The ship was scuttled by its crew off the coast of Iceland when intercepted by the Allies. The wreck was discovered in 2017, but no treasure was recovered. The cargo either wasn't aboard, transferred elsewhere before scuttling, or has been lost to the ocean. What these discoveries tell us. The documented treasure discoveries confirm several key facts. The scale was immense. Hundreds of tons of gold, thousands of artworks, wealth almost beyond calculation. It was deliberately hidden. These weren't accidental losses. Treasures were systematically concealed in mines, lakes, and forests. Witnesses were eliminated. Many Germans who knew hiding locations were killed to protect secrets. Documentation was destroyed. Manifests, maps, and records were often burned as Germany collapsed. Recovery is difficult. Even when general locations are known, recovery can take decades. And most importantly, if this much treasure was found, how much remains hidden? Now we turn to the trains that have never been found, the true ghost trains. These are cases where evidence suggests treasure trains existed, departed their origins, but never reached documented destinations. The Gold Train of Walbrzych. The most famous ghost train case emerged in 2015 in Poland. 2 treasure hunters, Piotr Koper and Andreas Richter, claimed they'd located a Nazi gold train buried in a tunnel near Walbrzych, formerly German Waldenburg. According to local legend, in early 1945, a heavily guarded train left Breslau, now Wrocław, carrying gold, jewelry, and artwork. It was supposedly heading for a tunnel complex in the Owl Mountains, the same area where Project Riese, a massive underground construction project, was located. The train allegedly entered a tunnel and never emerged. The tunnel entrance was sealed, possibly with explosives, hiding the train inside. Koper and Richter claimed they had ground-penetrating radar evidence showing a train-shaped anomaly in a collapsed tunnel. Polish authorities took the claim seriously enough that they restricted access to the area, brought in professional surveyors and geologists, conducted official investigations, even warned of potential booby traps. The story generated worldwide media attention. Treasure hunters descended on the area. The Polish government prepared for what could be a historically significant discovery. And then, nothing. Multiple investigations, sophisticated ground-penetrating radar surveys, and excavations found no train. The supposed radar signatures could be explained by underground infrastructure from the Riese project, tunnels, bunkers, and construction debris. but no train. The Walbrzych train probably never existed. But the fact that the claim was taken seriously by authorities, by media, by experts shows how plausible such a train is, because similar trains definitely existed. The Lienz treasure train. In Austria, there's stronger evidence for a real missing train. Testimony from multiple witnesses places a heavily loaded train in Lienz in April or May 1945. The train reportedly carried gold bars from the Austrian state reserves art, from Viennese museums, church treasures, private collections confiscated from Jewish families. The train arrived in Lienz ahead of advancing Allied forces. Orders came to disperse the cargo into mountain hiding places. Local laborers were conscripted to help move the treasure from the train into nearby mountain tunnels and caves. Then the laborers were shot. Mass graves near Lienz contain the bodies of dozens of Italian prisoners of war who were executed in May 1945, right around the time the treasure was supposedly hidden. The treasure has never been found. Searches of the mountains around Lienz have discovered old tunnels, some showing signs of recent 1945 activity, but no treasure. Did locals find and quietly loot it in the post-war chaos? Was it moved again before the Allies arrived? Is it still hidden in some undiscovered mountain cache? The Berlin treasure train. Multiple witnesses reported that in the final days of the Battle of Berlin, a train left the city heading south. This train allegedly carried contents of the Reichsbank's Berlin vault, Hitler's personal art collection, gold and currency from Nazi party headquarters, looted treasures from Berlin museums. The train's supposed destination was Bavaria, where Nazi leadership had planned a final stand in the National Redoubt, a mountain fortress that existed more in propaganda than reality. The train never arrived in Bavaria, or if it did, its cargo was never officially inventoried. Some researchers suggest the train was intercepted by Soviet forces and its cargo shipped to Moscow. Others believe it was looted by the Germans transporting it as discipline collapsed. A third theory suggests the train was buried in Thuringia, which would explain why the Soviets conducted extensive searches in the region in 1945 and 1946, long after the war ended. The Italian connection. Less well known are reports of trains that crossed into Italy from Austria in late April 1945. These trains allegedly carried Mussolini's personal gold reserves, treasures from northern Italian museums, looted art from Italian Jewish families, gold intended to fund Nazi escape routes, the famous rat lines. Some of this treasure may have funded the escape of Nazi war criminals to South America. Some may have been hidden in Italian mountain monasteries. Some may have been seized by partisans or Allied intelligence. There are persistent rumors of treasure hidden in Lake Como, where Mussolini was captured and executed. Multiple diving expeditions have searched, finding nothing conclusive. The patterns. When you examine multiple ghost train cases, patterns emerge. Mountain destinations. Many trains were supposedly heading for mountain areas, Alps, Carpathian Sudetes, where tunnels and caves offered hiding places. Final days timing. Most disappeared in the last 2 to 4 weeks of the war, when chaos was greatest witness elimination. Multiple cases involved mass executions of people who knew hiding locations. Destroyed documentation, maps, manifests, and records were systematically burned. Local legends. Nearly every area where Nazis operated has local stories of hidden treasure, but patterns don't equal proof. The question remains, how many of these trains actually existed versus how many are myths created by wartime confusion and wishful thinking? The search for Nazi gold trains has spawned a subculture of treasure hunters, ranging from serious historians to obsessive hobbyists to outright con artists. Let's meet some of the key figures and examine what drives this decades-long search. The professionals' organizations like the Monuments Men Foundation continue the work begun during the war, tracking looted art, identifying rightful owners, and facilitating returns. They approach the search methodically, analyzing Nazi documentation, interviewing witnesses and families, conducting archival research across multiple countries, working with governments and museums, focusing on restitution rather than treasure hunting. Their successes are remarkable. Thousands of stolen artworks have been identified and returned to families. Bank accounts have been traced. Looted treasures have been repatriated, but they estimate that hundreds of thousands of items remain missing. The obsessives. Then there are individuals who've dedicated their lives to finding specific trains or caches. Take Heinrich Haustein, a German historian who spent decades researching Nazi escape routes and hidden treasures. He claimed to have identified multiple burial sites based on interviews with elderly Germans who witnessed final days activities, analysis of Nazi documents, ground surveys of suspicious sites, deathbed confessions from former Wehrmacht soldiers. Haustein died in 2018 without finding the major treasure he sought, but his research contributed to our understanding of how systematically the Nazis hid their plunder. The technology. Modern treasure hunters employ sophisticated technology. Ground-penetrating radar, GPR, can detect underground anomalies, cavities, metal objects, disturbed soil, but results are ambiguous and require expert interpretation. Magnetometers detect metal underground, useful for finding large metal objects like train cars or gold caches, but also detect ordinary scrap metal, unexploded ordnance, and natural iron deposits. LiDAR, laser scanning that reveals landscape features invisible to the naked eye. Old roads, filled-in tunnels, disturbed ground, has helped locate hidden structures but not treasure. Drones and satellite imagery can survey large areas quickly, identifying sites worthy of ground investigation. But even with modern technology, finding hidden treasure is extraordinarily difficult. Europe is covered with underground infrastructure, sewers, utility tunnels, bunkers, basements. Mountains are riddled with natural caves and old mining tunnels. Every target identified by scanning equipment could be treasure or could be century-old mining debris. The legal complications. Finding treasure is one thing, keeping it is another. European laws regarding treasure hunting are complex. Germany. Treasure hunting without permission is illegal. Fines belong to the state. Unauthorized excavation can result in prosecution. Poland. Similar laws. The Wałbrzych train case showed that even with claims of discovery, excavation requires official permission and oversight. Austria. Treasure hunting is restricted. Fines are typically claimed by the state with possible finder's fees. Czech Republic. Archaeological sites are protected. Unauthorized digging is criminal. Even if you find gold, what then? If it's identifiable as Nazi loot, it must be returned to victims or their heirs. If it's artwork, it belongs in museums or to rightful owners. If it's currency, it's probably worthless. Nazi Reichsmarks have no value. The finder typically gets nothing or a small percentage. This makes legitimate treasure hunting almost pointless from a profit perspective. You invest time and money, take legal risks, and even if successful, you don't keep the treasure. So why do people do it? The psychology. Treasure hunters are driven by various motivations, historical interest. Some genuinely want to solve historical mysteries and return stolen property to rightful owners. Adventure. The search itself, exploring tunnels, investigating remote areas, using technology, is thrilling, independent of finding treasure. Obsession. For some, it becomes an all-consuming passion. The mystery becomes more important than the solution. Justice. Particularly for descendants of Nazi victims, finding stolen property is about justice and remembrance, not profit. Profit. Yes, some still hope to find treasure they can somehow keep or sell. These are usually the least successful and most likely to face legal problems. Fame. Being the person who finds a legendary treasure train would bring international recognition. The frauds. Unfortunately, ghost train legends have also attracted con artists. Over the decades, numerous scams have occurred. Fake treasure maps sold to gullible investors, fraudulent companies promising shares of future discoveries. forged documents supposedly showing treasure locations, elaborate hoaxes designed to generate publicity and attract funding. The Walberzik case, while not definitively proven fraudulent, showed how easily treasure claims can generate attention and potentially profit from media rights, tours, and publicity. The ethics modern treasure hunting raises ethical questions. Disturbing war sites. Many potential hiding places are also war graves or Holocaust sites. Excavating for treasure risks, desecrating these locations. Restitution versus profit. Should treasure hunting focus on returning stolen property to victims, or is it acceptable to profit from war plunder? Historical preservation. Unauthorized digging can destroy archaeological context and historical evidence. Resource allocation. Should governments spend resources investigating treasure claims or focus on other priorities? These aren't abstract questions. They affect how searches are conducted, whether official permission is granted, and what happens to any discoveries. After examining the evidence, the searches, and the claims, it's time for a reality check. What do we actually know versus what do we hope or imagine? What we know for certain. Fact. 1. The Nazis looted enormous wealth from occupied Europe. This is documented beyond any doubt. Hundreds of tons of gold, hundreds of thousands of artworks, wealth almost beyond calculation. Fact 2. Much of this wealth was moved in the final months of the war. Multiple treasure repositories have been found, Merkers, Altaussee, and others. This proves the system of dispersing and hiding wealth existed. Fact 3. Not all looted wealth has been recovered. The gap between what was stolen and what's been found is substantial. Billions in today's dollars remain unaccounted for. Fact 4. Witnesses reported specific trains and convoys that disappeared. These aren't just legends. There are names, dates, and testimonies from people who saw these transports. Fact 5. Many people who knew hiding locations were executed. Mass graves near potential treasure sites contained victims killed specifically to protect secrets. What we can reasonably infer. Inference. 1. Some treasure was successfully hidden and never recovered. The combination of systematic hiding, witness elimination, and destroyed documentation makes this highly probable. Inference. 2. Much missing treasure was actually looted by Germans themselves. As discipline collapsed in April or May 1945, theft was rampant. Guards stole from the trains they guarded. Officials took what they could carry. Chaos enabled wholesale theft. Inference 3. Some treasure was recovered secretly. Allied forces, Soviet forces, and locals who found caches had incentive to keep quiet and keep the treasure. This happened with the Hungarian Gold Train. Official recovery followed by unofficial theft. Inference. 4. Much treasure has been destroyed. Trains were bombed in air raids. Repositories were caught in combat. Hitler's orders to destroy rather than surrender were sometimes followed. Fire, flooding, and structural collapse have consumed unknown quantities. Inference. 5. The truly valuable items, famous artworks, identifiable gold bars, were probably found or destroyed long ago. What remains hidden, if anything, is likely less significant. What probably isn't true. Myth. 1. Vast trains, full of gold or buried intact. The image of a complete train sealed in a tunnel, loaded with gold bars waiting to be discovered, is almost certainly fantasy. Trains were valuable themselves and would be dismantled. Cargo would be removed and dispersed. Burying an entire train makes no logistical sense. Myth. 2. Locals don't know where treasure is. Generations have passed since 1945. If locals knew of treasure, they'd have recovered it. The idea that secret locations passed from father to son for 80 years without anyone looking strains credibility. Myth. 3. Modern technology will easily find hidden treasure. Ground-penetrating radar, metal detectors, and other tools are useful but not magical. They produce ambiguous results requiring excavation to verify. Europe's landscape is full of metal, underground structures, and natural anomalies that look like treasure on scans. Myth. 4. Finding treasure makes you rich. Even if you find Nazi gold, you don't get to keep it. Laws require returning stolen property. At best, you might receive a finder's fee, typically a small percentage of value. Myth. And column 5. The Nazis were competent at hiding things. Popular imagination sees Nazi Germany as efficient and organized. Reality in spring 1945 was chaos. Communication was broken, authority was collapsed, transportation was bombed. Plans to hide treasure often went wrong. Things that were supposed to be hidden carefully were abandoned hastily. The myth of German efficiency doesn't apply to this period. Where is the missing treasure? If we accept that some treasure remains hidden, where is it most likely? Possibility 1. In private collections. Much of the missing treasure is probably in private hands, found by soldiers, locals, or treasure hunters who never reported it. That gold bar in someone's safe, that painting in an attic, treasure quietly sold or kept across decades. Possibility 2. Destroyed war destroys, fire, explosives, structural collapse, water damage. Items that were hidden may no longer exist, especially documents, currency, and materials that don't survive harsh conditions. Possibility 3. In Soviet territory. The Red Army captured huge areas where treasure was hidden. Soviet trophy brigades were systematic in collecting valuables. Much of what they took went to Moscow and was never officially acknowledged. If it still exists, it's in Russian archives, museums, or private collections. Possibility 4. In very deep water lakes, rivers, and coastal waters swallow treasures that will never be recovered. Diving is dangerous and often futile in deep, murky, or cold water. Lake Toplitz is just one example of many. Possibility 5. Still hidden but findable. Some treasure may genuinely remain hidden in locations that could potentially be discovered, but it's likely smaller caches rather than trainloads in very remote or dangerous locations without clear documentation or maps belonging rightfully to victims or their heirs. The uncomfortable truth. Most of the missing treasure isn't romantically hidden waiting to be found. It's in the pockets of people who found it and kept quiet. Destroyed in the war, recovered by Soviets and never acknowledged, so dispersed and altered that it's unidentifiable or simply lost to time, decay, and entropy. The ghost trains, to the extent they existed, were probably looted, destroyed, or scattered long ago. The romantic image of an intact train full of gold, sealed in a mountain tunnel, is almost certainly fiction. Beyond the treasure itself, the ghost trains represent something larger about World War II, justice and memory. Justice incomplete. The Nazi regime stole wealth from millions of people. They plundered nations. They stripped families of everything before murdering them. Most of this wealth was never returned. Even treasure that was found was often mishandled. The Hungarian Gold Train's fate, sold at auction, stolen by troops, lost to bureaucracy, shows how even official recovery didn't mean justice for victims. How much wealth that should have gone to survivors or heirs disappeared into private collections, government coffers, or the black market. We'll never know the full total. The ghost trains symbolize this incomplete justice. Every missing cache represents property that was never returned, families that were never compensated, theft that was never remedied, memory and myth. The ghost trains have passed into legend, joining other mysteries of WW2. But legends can distort history. They can make Nazi Germany seem more organized and powerful than it was. They can distract from the human cost of looting, real people robbed of their possessions. They can turn serious restitution efforts into adventure stories. They can let us forget that much of the treasure was stolen from Holocaust victims. We need to remember that every gold bar, every painting, every piece of jewelry represents someone's loss. These aren't just treasures, they're evidence of crimes. What should happen to found treasure? When Nazi loot is discovered today, what should happen? art and cultural objects should return to original owners or heirs if ownership can't be established, should go to appropriate museums with acknowledgement of their origin. Gold and currency should go to compensation funds for Holocaust survivors and their families. Personal items should be returned to families whenever possible or preserved in memorial sites. Proceeds from sales. If items must be sold to facilitate distribution, proceeds should fund Holocaust education and remembrance. This is what should happen. What actually happens often falls short. The search continues. Despite the low probability of major discoveries, the search for ghost trains continues. New generations of researchers analyze documents. Technology improves. Witnesses come forward with deathbed confessions or family stories. Occasionally, something is found. In 2019, Polish researchers discovered a buried Nazi cache of jewelry and precious metals near a former concentration camp. In 2021, German construction workers unearthed Nazi gold coins during a building excavation. These aren't trains full of gold. There are small caches, individual finds, but they prove that hidden Nazi treasure still exists and is occasionally discovered. Will a major treasure train ever be found? Probably not. The ones that existed were likely looted or destroyed long ago, but the possibility, however remote, keeps the search alive. Why it matters? The ghost trains matter not because of the treasure itself, but because of what they represent. Historical accountability. Every found item is evidence of Nazi crimes and reminder of what was stolen. Justice for victims. Returning stolen property, even generations later, acknowledges what was taken and provides some measure of justice. Historical completeness. Finding and documenting these treasures helps complete the historical record of Dabulpur and the Holocaust. Education. Stories of looting and recovery educate new generations about the scope of Nazi crimes. Closure. For families of victims, recovering stolen property can provide psychological closure and tangible connection to murdered relatives. Final thoughts. The ghost trains of gold haunt us precisely because they're both real and mythical. Real trains carrying real treasure definitely existed and disappeared, but the legend has grown beyond the facts, incorporating wish fulfillment, adventure fantasy, and the seductive idea that vast wealth lies hidden waiting to be discovered. The reality is more mundane and more tragic. The treasure was stolen from people who were then murdered. Much of it was found and mishandled. Much was destroyed. Much was stolen again by people who should have protected it. And what remains hidden, if anything significant remains, is probably scattered, decayed, or in places where it can never be recovered. But still they search. Treasure hunters with metal detectors, researchers with documents, governments with excavation equipment, families with stories passed down. Because even now, 80 years later, the full story of what the Nazis stole and where they hid it remains incomplete. Perhaps that's fitting. The crime was so vast, the destruction so complete, that full accounting is impossible. The ghost trains remain ghosts, partly found, partly lost, partly myth, partly real. They remind us that some crimes are so enormous that justice can never be complete. And they challenge us to remember that behind every gold bar, every painting, every piece of jewelry was a person, a family, a life destroyed. The treasure isn't just gold, it's memory. And our responsibility is not just to find it, but to honor the lives it represents. The ghost trains roll on through history, carrying more than gold. They carry responsibility, they carry memory, and they carry the uncomfortable reminder that theft and murder on a civilization-wide scale leaves wounds that never fully heal. The search continues, not just for treasure, but for justice, not just for gold, but for truth. And perhaps that search, even more than any discovery, is what really matters.